Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel discussion. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and ATARC is a nonprofit organization that provides facilitation and collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees who are joining us today, and a special thanks to Khalid Tamimi, Tori Vanek, and the entire Verico team. This afternoon, we are going to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A session where we will pop in a few polls and then answer your questions. Before we begin, I just want to encourage the entire audience to please submit questions of your own in the Q&A section down below on your screen. I would also like to remind you to answer this poll questions as they come up throughout today's discussion in order to ensure that you receive your CPE credits. And with that, I would like to welcome our panelists to please come on camera and come off mute, and we will begin with a round of introductions. So share with us who you are, what agency you're with, what your role is there, and anything else you'd like our audience to know up top. Let's begin with Shannon, please.
Hey everyone, my name is Shannon DiMartino. I am currently the Chief of the Technology Oversight Branch at the USCIS Office of Privacy. I work to integrate privacy principles into the system development lifecycle across the agency. We established my branch about 2.5 years ago to truly implement privacy design principles using the risk-based methodology and NIST guidelines. We support projects across USCIS and allow teams to really analyze the privacy, security, data management risks early on in the process so we can better build secure systems. I've spent 10 years in the government doing privacy and cybersecurity, and I'm very happy to join you all today.
Thanks, Shannon. Let's hear from Jeff next, please.
Shannon, that's setting a high bar there. Hi, I'm Jeff Schilling. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the National Cancer Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health. And mainly my job is focused around getting the NCI mission functional, which is a highly a research mission, in the work in the federal government, a cybersecurity model. And so it's related to our designs, our education, and our maintaining a staff so we can get all these vulnerabilities under control.
Thank you, Jeff. Jumping over to Alyssa next.
Hi all, my name is Elisa Viola, pronouns she, her, and I support the GSA Technology Transformation Services, and TTS exists to design and deliver a digital government with and for the American people. So TTS, we apply modern methodologies and technologies to improve the lives of the public and all the public servants, so us here, federal service folks, and we help agencies make their services more accessible, efficient, and effective, like with cybersecurity, with modern applications, platforms, processes, personnel, and software services. And within TTS, I'm supporting the transition for Max.gov from OMB to GSA. And Max.gov is a platform that allows collaboration between federal agencies themselves and between federal agencies and the public. So, and the biggest challenge that I'm finding with this program is kind of balancing the customer experience with applying the appropriate controls to reduce risk from threats. And it has a lot of fun opportunities to apply and strengthen the cybersecurity for there.
Thank you, Elisa. And over to Andre.
Hey, good morning, or actually good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well. Delighted to be here. I'm Andre Mendez. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Commerce. And as such, I have overall responsibility for IT for the department proper, and also the 13 bureaus that encompass it. As you can imagine, with a portfolio, with that breadth of scope, we have a substantial number of challenges from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so, one of my main responsibilities is to ensure that we have a common strategy that is aggressive and that leverages our funding to the best advantage to the American taxpayer. And so look forward to the discussion and to exchange good ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Let's jump over to Daria next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daria Medved, and I'm the Acting Director of Emerging Technologies over at the Office of Government-Wide Policy at the General Services Administration. We're a relatively new division established less than 3 years ago, but our mission is to support the federal government on the use, adoption, and response to new technologies through policy and best practices. And what we do is we monitor new and emerging technology, whether that's new to government, used everywhere except government, clear disruptors in any tech fields, new technology that's becoming a standard, or actual true futuristic emerging technology. And we assess the potential impacts to government, whether that's negative or positive. And we assess the need for new policies, updates to existing policies, or potentially whether there needs to be clarifications or playbooks for best practices. And we work with many different agencies, as well as OMB, and then the CIO and CISO councils, communities of practice, and pretty much anyone who wants to work with us to update those policies government-wide.
Thank you, Daria. And Tori, wrap us up with introductions, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tori Vanek. I'm the Product Director for Government and Regulatory at Veracode. And before I came to Veracode, I was a federal civilian with 18F. Elisa and I used to actually work together at GSA. And I was with Air Force Kessel Run. So I understand the government challenges that everyone's probably facing. So it's exciting to be here.
Excellent, thank you. So the first person I'm going to call on is Elisa, actually, for question number 1. Shifting left is all about moving security earlier in the development life cycle. So do all security technologies require a left shift? And if not, which ones are most appropriate? If you could please speak to that first question for us, Elisa.
Yeah, I was racking my brain thinking about this, and I hate that I came to the conclusion that in our federal system, to get your initial authorization, it really does have to be a all left or none, unfortunately. And that is because for the initial authorization, the authorizing official needs to understand the risk for what they're doing, for what they're approving initially. But that doesn't mean that there can't be some wiggle room on the controls that are selected, and that some controls can't move to the right post authorization. So as far as the processes like vulnerability management, change management, incident response, continuity of operation, those all have to be done ahead of getting the ATO. But for some things within those processes, maybe you don't have to have automated vulnerability management. Well, I don't know how you do vulnerability management, not automated these days, but you can shift some things to the left. So it's processes have to be all left, but specific ways that you implement them can some be right. I would say that would be how I would describe that.
Yeah, thank you, Elisa. And Tori, I'd also love to hear from you on this question number one, what your perspective is.
Oh, sure. So I probably agree with Lisa. Like, I think shifting left is also not just the technology shifting left, so being earlier in the stage, but like the communications between like the developer teams and the security teams and operations to make sure like the processes and the workflows are, before they used to be in the process, if that makes sense. So like getting people together earlier to, what is the security policy and what are, like all the teams just working together more. So if we move that earlier into the process, and I think I saw this in my last 2 years in government, like teams are starting to come together more and earlier in the process instead of like when something's trying to go to production and someone's scans are failing and everybody's in a panic, right? So like move it earlier in the conversation and it seems to work better.
Yeah, definitely. Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of starting to work on a new system where the cybersecurity components and the cybersecurity elements are not front and center with everything else nowadays, to me is anathema. It can no longer happen. As part of DevSecOps, and all of the thought processes behind that, security has to be at the table from the inception of even the establishment of requirements. So that it can be totally and completely ingrained into every new system that you move into eventually an ATO and an implementation. At the same time, we have the tremendous challenge of dealing with legacy issues where we have to retrofit a lot of the applications with new security postures that are part of our entire cybersecurity framework. And so, this needs to be part of the conversation from the get-go. And fully integrated. It's almost criminal not to do so, because you cannot re-engineer it afterwards without wasting money and resources. Because if you don't think about it to start with, eventually you'll get yourself down an alley that might be very difficult to negotiate your way out of. And so it must be part of the technology stack from the get-go.
Thank you, Andre, and I appreciate all of our comments so far. Does any of our other panelists have additional comments for that question there? Okay, well then, Jeffrey, I'd love to call on you next. So this is around DevSecOps. Is DevSecOps only appropriate for modern application environments? And which environments would you say require it the most?
Well, I think this is a good follow-up to the first question because in a way, both shift left, which is, a name for basically kind of doing things like Andre said, the correct way, is really really different than, DevSecOps is a way to do that. So I would say in general, if your system has to be secure, then you should as much as possible do DevSecOps, which is baking in security into the development, the operations creation cycle. So yes, I would say it was as much as it possibly can. One of the things that's I think is difficult though is the culture of the teams that are doing those products, developing those products. So some are very desirable to say we want to do this. Other ones are really like, well, we pass it over security and they tells us if it's secure. And they're just so used to that they're like, well, I don't really know what secure is. They're the ones who always tell me what to fix. And so, you kind of have to, culturally change that to be, to me, we generally like the term in general, just more a lean term. So you have 0 defects. And so in the end, the product comes in with 0 defects. So you should have 0 defects. And that means security should find nothing. And the security should be more of an audit, if anything, because you did security in the very beginning. So to me, it's really that's kind of mindset we adopt. And it's a lot easier to find out information about it because lean is so readily available in the literature, right? It's been around since the 70s. And so it's easier to understand that you really want to go to this, ferret out all the mistakes. And security is just or lack of security is just one of the mistakes, or any kind of vulnerability you cook in.
Thank you, Jeff. Would any of the other panelists like to tack on to Jeff's response to that question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and super plus one what Jeff said about it really being a cultural thing, where DevSecOps is really about the culture of embedding cybersecurity within the application development teams. Like I still see today where folks are starting to build new applications and they say, okay, we need a product manager, an engineer, and a designer. And I'm always like, okay, yeah, and a security person, right? Like I like to say, like, for every designer, you need at least one or a half body for security, because we get into conversations of like authority to operates being the long pole in the tent. Well, it's like, well, what do you expect when you're not resourcing and having folks that are experts in the processes and the tools embedded within the teams, sitting side by side? And it is a culture, and security is everybody's job. So it is the developer's job, it is the operations job, but it really needs to have somebody that is a security expert that hones their knowledge, skills, and abilities specific to that domain without other, pushing code or doing tickets, to really know emerging threats and other activities that could help, embrace and share in the culture.
Thank you, Elisa. Great insights. And any additional comments from anybody else before we move on? Yes, Andre.
Yeah, absolutely right. Quite honestly, I mean, this is already an absolute requirement that has been for a while, that you have that integration from the get-go. This is going to be even more important and absolutely fundamental to proper development of applications in a zero trust environment, where you have to have that verification capability at every single step in the technology stack, from the networking, from the identity, and access control. And if the application is not part of that mindset of never trust, always verify, you are effectively compromising the last layer, where you enable for compromises to happen, within the application itself. And so, absolutely, this needs to be there from the get-go and be part of a cultural shift in terms of what it means to work in a team.
Thank you, Andre. Shannon, I would like to call on you next. If you could speak to what are the biggest challenges and opportunities you see ahead for agencies trying to implement application security?
Sure. So in general, there are a ton of opportunities, but from my perspective as a privacy person, the biggest opportunity in implementing application security or DevSecOps is that you're really having a lot of the discussions about security and privacy earlier in the process, which ultimately can help you have a more secure system from the get-go. Like everybody mentioned in the past couple of questions, you really want to make sure that what you're designing does not have any vulnerabilities at the end of it. Federal systems collect, process, and store vast amounts of data about public and federal employees, and much of it is very sensitive data that needs to be protected against the ever-evolving threat landscape out there. In a traditional federal agency, the Privacy Office and Security Office are oftentimes very focused on completing compliance documents, whether it's the privacy documents to comply with the Privacy Act and E-Government Act, or it's the security authorization documents. And all of these are very important things, but there's so much more work that needs to come before it's time to work on those documents. And application security really gives you the opportunity to integrate privacy and security in those initial development discussions. So you can do a deep early analysis of what that business need is. What data are you involving in this process? Who really needs access to the data? And any possible data sharing or system connections that may need to be implemented. So you can really identify any kinds of privacy or security risks associated with all of that and design the system in a way to mitigate those risks. I've seen many instances where we have these initial conversations and you determine that maybe you don't need to collect social security numbers, or maybe we do need tighter access controls on how people are getting approved to have access to the system. Or are there opportunities for more role-based training to be implemented? We won't necessarily prevent major breaches from following these processes and having these conversations, but we can help reduce the severity of the impact later on. Because if a system is breached, if it has 1 million social security numbers in it, that's pretty bad. But if you had those conversations and were able to identify that you don't really need those social security numbers for that business need, based on that security and privacy guidance early on, the risk and the impact to individuals of that breach is a lot less severe in the long run.
Thank you, Shannon. Well said. And any other panelists would like to contribute to that question as well? Okay, well, we will go ahead and pop up our first poll question then. I want to make sure that we get these in. According to CISA's Zero Trust Maturity Model, how would you rate your agency's readiness in the application security functions? So please go ahead and respond to that, whether it be traditional, advanced, optimal, or you are unsure. And we'll give our audience a moment to respond to that, and then we'll post our results. And as a reminder as well, if you have any audience questions, you can go ahead and submit those in now so that we can get them answered for you before the end of the panel. Okay, let's see here. Looks like mostly advanced is the response back to that. And Jeff, I want to call on you next. I actually want to kind of circle back on the application security side. What are some of your biggest concerns around the implementation of application security?
So generally for us, we have both a significant amount of products that we purchase, so COTS products, and then all the way from obviously operating systems, databases, cloud products, but also very specialized kind of scientific research things like genomic analysis tools or medical imaging type systems. And so we have those systems that are basically someone else is developing, of which we have kind of zero ingredient list, right? So we can pick up any piece of food and we can look at it. We can say, oh, I'm on keto, man. I can't have any sugar, right? We can't do that with our products. We just have to say, and let's face it, these vendors are rolling lots of open source software into their product and kind of putting their own little spin on it and calling it, oh, this is our unique IP. And a lot of that, the open source licensing allows them to do that, or they make certain modifications to get around the open source licensing. So that really means we basically have an unknown risk. All we can do is test it from the outside, poke and prod at it to see if it breaks. But we've been hit several times with 0 days, which means that somebody that all of a sudden, oh, there's a vulnerability in here. And we also know that big malware, either states or other groups, they are working hard to figure these things out. And so I would say to us, we have the biggest concern on that product, because on the other side, the thing we talked about, the DevSecOps, we've developed those things. We know what's in them, and we also know the quality of the teams that built those things. They're generally under contract. There is a lot of business risk for any of our contractors to turn in and give us a bad product, right? That's very bad for them. But the other products, they're just like, oh well, our bad. We'll rebrand it. We'll fix it. We'll get rid of that, or we'll patch it, or don't worry, it's in the next patch cycle. It's almost become part and parcel of their business, and it's accepted that things are inherently vulnerable, And I think something, I brought this up to the HHS CIO, that it's really kind of my main concern, that we really don't have any visibility into the risk that we're undertaking, other than, okay, I tapped on this and it seems good. So, and granted, the tools are good. So what we end up doing, and what we're doing now, and I think all of you are doing, is we're putting in a lot of controls on the network to see if there's anything going on, untoward going on. This traffic shouldn't be there. But even then, as we were spending millions of dollars doing that, I'm like, well, okay, so when we find something, then what do we do? Then we have to spend more money kind of tracking it down. And just like in medicine, you have a lot of, we use the term false positive. It's a term we use a lot, so I'm very used to it. But what it means generally is that something looks one way, like in our case, positive, it's positively malware, but it's false. It's not. It's just this user connected to the wrong server. And so they're coming from a different part of the LAN. And that never happened before, but it throws up a red flag. And what, we're supposed to deploy a tech to figure out what's going on. Okay, that's good, but that costs money. And then if we don't, okay, well, then we didn't even do anything anyway with all this new information. So I've used the term kind of if we're going to drink from this like digital well that we have, we cannot poison that well with this malware. It's a huge risk we're taking. And so and we see now these malware organizations, whether they're state driven or generally they're state supported, but they're kind of on their own, right? But they're making money. And that means there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there, right? Capitalism has created the ability to mine the weaknesses of the system that we have. So I don't really see anything happening in the government or anywhere to address this systemic design flaw of what we have. It's from the internet is weak like that. You can just get on with no, you need an ID to get on the internet, just get on. And then, and all we're really doing is adding more cybersecurity people. We need more cybersecurity people. I'm like, well, cybersecurity people, they're just there to patch the wounded. They're not there to fix the systemic problem. So I would say that's kind of our thing on the software part. I mean, I think the DevSecOps, that's what everybody's learning in college. That's what all the developers want to do. That's what the security people want to do. So on our custom products we're building, we think we know they're secure, right? We built them to be that way, at least as secure as we can with the lumber and the steel that we built them with, right? They're with the open source products that we do use, but at least we know what's in there. So I guess I would say that you got to be cognizant of that risk you're just baked in by using these products. You don't know what's in there.
Thank you, Jeff. Andre?
Yeah, I think Jeff is absolutely right. I mean, we have seen some exposure from supply chain issues where a piece of trusted software that is an integral part of your environment, your technology stack, turns out to have a built-in flaw by virtue of some upstream compromise. So that is extremely important. But like in medicine, I'd much rather have a false positive than a false negative. So that's definitely the case. I think that the balance is really about using software as a service, where there is a baked-in type of functionality that you would have a hard time replicating and could spend a lot of money maintaining, over a period of time to have the same type of functionality, versus taking the risk on a vendor whose shareholder value is going to be absolutely determined by their ability to bring to the table a product that is a better risk proposition than you doing your own development, right? Otherwise, we would all be writing our own email systems, and we no longer do that, right? So those software layers in the software stack have been over time sort of abstracted from our environment so that we don't have to deal with them. And I think that that's going to continue to be the case. Hopefully what we have is a situation where, because we build those abstraction layers with software as a service, infrastructure as a service, application as a service, we dedicate the majority of our time to the DevSecOps of the unique functionality that is absolutely essential for your agency or department or any other organization. And therefore, you can focus on the security of that with the understanding that although there is a risk on your entire technology stack by relying on other folks, that they have a tremendous incentive to keep those platforms secure and therefore provide you with a product that offers a better risk proposition than if you had to do everything from the ground up. You know, it's all about trade-offs. There's no absolutes. And the other model of doing all of your stuff in-house is no longer feasible, both from a cybersecurity standpoint or even from a funding standpoint, because just hiring the expert to do all of that is almost impossible nowadays because of the competition for talented resources.
Thank you, Andre. And I would like to turn our panelists' attention over to our audience question from David Didel next. He asks, are government agencies considering the requirement for a software bill of materials, otherwise known as SBOM, to help highlight the risks of open sources? So if there's any specific initiatives you could speak to. And right before we answer that, please consider your response. Let's go ahead and pop up poll question. I believe it's number 3 on our list. And go ahead and respond. Does your agency have a tool for managing SBOMs for all applications used by the agency? So audience, please respond to poll number 3, and I will call on Elisa to please answer the audience question if that's why you had your hand raised.
Yep, it is. Actually, so we have piloted an software bill of materials pilot, and where we used a tool to help us do discovery for our software bill of materials and understand where all of our dependencies and transitive dependencies were within our custom developed software. And that has progressed that now we have a kind of scaffolding. So whenever we develop a new project, we use a template for, and that it will automatically, once you use that template, it will continue to do software bill of materials from that template. And that's should be in the 18F GitHub repository for, I think it's the Ruby template.
Thank you, Elisa. Would any of our other panelists like to respond to that? Okay, well, I will go back to my list of questions. Then we were still on application security. And Daria, I would love to hear from you next. So my question is going to be, should an agency or department wait until the implementation of application security becomes mandatory to integrate into their ecosystems? Could you please respond to that question?
Absolutely. So the short answer is no. The long answer is definitely no. Policy takes a long time to release and to disseminate. Usually from the time that I think that something should be a policy and implemented right now to when it actually comes out as official policy takes about 2 years, sometimes longer, and sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. So as much as possible, agencies should really be looking at the latest trends in cybersecurity, what's being adopted by industry, looking at their resources to see what they can adopt now before it becomes policy. Anything that has been become like government-wide policy really shouldn't be a surprise. You know, we've got, zero trust. Everyone should have seen that one coming. IPv6, everyone should have seen that coming. The latest one is the quantum computing, which is something that, being quantum secure, that is definitely something that everyone should have seen coming. It's down the pipe, it's going to be a couple years out, but everyone should have seen this one coming. DevSecOps is another one that, it may not necessarily be a policy just yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a policy in the future. And we should just be prepared for anything that is a latest trend in cybersecurity and already adopted by the industry. I also wanted to point out, maybe it's a small little secret, maybe it's not, but those agencies that have best practices on really great cybersecurity and other emerging technologies, sometimes we take those ideas and those are what become the policies for government-wide. So if you guys do have really good programs at different agencies, we want to know about them. We want to get them government-wide.
Thank you, Daria. How about our other panelists? Would you respond similarly as Daria, or any additional insight into, what your own agency or department has been doing for those kinds of things? Shannon?
I would also suggest to look at some sort of less traditional security tool focused things that you can explore before you're waiting for that policy to come out. A lot of security and privacy comes down to the human factor, that people make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have pretty bad consequences. So look to see how you can just strengthen your general security and privacy awareness training, maybe have role-based training, tighten access controls to the system, and really look at your user groups to see, have you truly implemented the principles of least privileges, or could you better identify user groups and design those roles for those user groups, which I think is a good complement to a lot of the more traditional security practices.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shannon. Anyone else on the panel? All right, well, jumping to my next question then, Daria, actually, I wanted to call on you for this one too. Could you please speak to any of the challenges that you might face when trying to automate as part of your modernization and automation efforts, or what things have made this the most successful?
So my response might be a little different from others on this team. I mean, I used to be a practitioner for many, many years, but now I work in policy to kind of clear those roadblocks for others. And so most of the information I'm getting from agencies, my own as well as others, is in the reports of, feedback to, is this policy working? Is this policy not working? How do we fix it? How do we make it better? So what I've seen in terms of challenges to adoption is the ability to, like a lot of these policies come out and all of a sudden we have a new priority on zero trust, and now we have a new priority on IPv6, and really wanting to have agencies work on those concurrently and not have them be as standalone, separate ventures. So when you're automating, when you're working on all of that kind of stuff, it's kind of an important piece to take a step back and take a look at all of your priorities and build them all into one roadmap, and not just have a roadmap for each individual piece. For instance, like, zero trust and IPv6, there's some people that are, or some agencies, I should say, that are very much focused on one versus another, but IPv6 should never be seen as a blocker to zero trust, but just as an enabler. If we work on one and then the other, then we're doubling the work or even more. But if we have it all in one roadmap and we build in DevSecOps and automations across the board, then we're really, might take us a little bit longer to get to the goal line, but we're really having a very inclusive plan with all of the initiatives.
Yeah, thank you, Daria. Would any of the other panelists like to respond? Elisa?
Yeah, I think what Daria said as well. I'm sorry, I was a little out in Miami, as we say. So I think it's really important to have that perspective and do that security aspect within the program, and make sure that you get everybody together and have that comprehensive program, so that you're designing that security in and keeping automation in mind, as well as the customer experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, thank you. Okay, I am again going to turn our panelists' attention over to the audience Q&A chat. So Pavitra writes in, I would be interested to know the panel's feedback on the FedRAMP process for commercial products. Do you think this process, I assume, mitigates the risk that was raised on third-party tools? So please take a moment to consider that question. And in the meantime, I'm going to call for our third and final poll question. It should be poll number 2 on our sheet. We could get that up on the screen. Since the Log4j vulnerability was discovered, how much has application security been prioritized in your agency? So audience at home, please respond to the poll, and then I'm going to turn it back over to our panelists for the audience question. Would anyone on the panel like to respond to that? Tori, I see your hand up first, so go ahead.
Yeah, so Veracode just got FedRAMP moderate authorization yesterday. So it's a huge deal. I know, right? And we just really like the opportunity to be able to work with the government, like kind of in a succinct way. We really looked at it as it was a great investment for like a private sector public partnership. So we're really excited. And you look through the list of the FedRAMP authorizations, and it's a really impressive group of companies. So Vericode's really excited to be added to that list. But I think with GSA, like running the FedRAMP program, it helps all the agencies, right? Like National Cancer Institute and Commerce can use the tool. Like GSA has done a ton of work to make sure that we're secure and safe and, all those good policy things. And then it's just a huge advantage to the federal agencies.
Thank you, Tori. And
Sure.
Did you want to respond to that one next? Or was your hand up from the prior question? Or did we lose Elisa?
Oh, sorry, prior question.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Let's see. I think I saw Jeff's hand up. Jeff, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I can just quickly say, I don't really think it will. I mean, I think, FedRAMP is an awesome program because it allows us to kind of create this government-wide authority to operate, or, provisional authority to operate. So that means one group is going to take responsibility for doing the main security analysis of that product or that suite of products. So I would say generally we don't see it. I mean, we see people who have FedRAMP authorization, they still have vulnerabilities, they still have 0 days, they still have design flaws. I think security is a ever moving thing, and it's ever maturing, and it's also if it were perfect, we would never get anything authorized because no product is perfect because it's built by humans. So I would say you have to still be careful. I mean, and so when you do the FedRAMP, you still have, your group still has to do an ATO on top of that. You have to authorize it, and you have to make sure that where in general, it's a big kind of, it's a low risk product in the end, but still you have to say, how we're going to use that product, does it match our risk? And so whether that's, risk of data or risk of can we train people appropriately and things like that. So I think, you have to be very cautious no matter what. I mean, these vulnerabilities are out there, they're baked in, and if there's no test to discover them, then how do you even know they're there? So they couldn't be discovered. So I would say while it is great, and it is getting more of these products used centrally or used kind of throughout the government, it helps build their security profile up. So you find things more.
Thank you, Jeff. And we're going to go Andre and then Daria. Go ahead, Andre. Andre, you're on mute.
I think Jeff made actually most of the points I wanted to make because he's absolutely right. It's no full assurance that you're good to go with that product, but it does bring to the table some value in that it provides you with some comfort that there has been a substantial amount of testing done that brings the product to a certain level of expectations. You then have to deal with your own environment, with your own controls that you want to bring to the table and take a look at, and then make a decision, from an ATO standpoint in terms of the risk level you're willing to accept. But I would posit the following: would I rather take a risk on a product that has been FedRAMP, that has gone through that, and therefore as a certain imprimatur from other government agencies in terms of security, versus a product that is not, right? And the answer, of course, is yes. I would like a product that has already undergone what is likely to be a substantial amount of scrutiny. But there are no 100% assurances. They just don't exist, period. We live with constant risk, and that is one of the beautiful things about the zero trust architecture, is that You are not expecting to eliminate all the risk. You're expected to eliminate a substantial amount of the risk and then mitigate and minimize the impact that comes from that risk that you were not able to completely mitigate. And so, yeah, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act, but it comes with the landscape that we have chosen as a profession. And I think that by and large, that will be the case from now until the end of time.
Thank you, Andre. Let's go Daria and then Elisa.
Thank you. I just wanted to completely agree with Andre and Jeff and add just a couple more words that, yes, it's absolutely important to take what we got and reevaluate, reassess. And I just wanted to kind of bring up this idea of culture in cybersecurity and the idea that we should never be in a maintenance mode with cybersecurity. We should always be striving for doing better. I know that there's a lot of like competing cyber initiatives right now, especially coming out from the White House. And we should always be looking to never get to a maintenance mode. We should always be looking ahead, as well as always trust, the motto, trust but verify. Just because it's got a FedRAMP doesn't mean that we have to trust it. It means we have to verify, but we can trust it a little bit, and it is very good program. I do want to make sure that I mention that. It does get us a good part of the way there.
Thank you, Daria. Elisa?
Oh yeah, for sure. Exactly. And I do want to like echo what Daria is saying, as well as that it is not an approved software list. I like to say it's like a pre-assessed software list. So you do have to kind of do your own evaluation to make sure that it fits into your own risk posture. And I will say that the FedRAMP program has been doing some amazing work recently, where for agencies that sponsor commercial cloud service providers to get authorized at the agency level, they're really encouraging anybody that is using the product, those agencies, to come together to do a joint continuous monitoring. And that's also going to be a lot easier with the OSCAL SSPs. There was the first SSP delivered in the Open Security Control Assessment language recently. So, we're talking about this automation and DevSecOps. So those are the types of things that the program is moving forward. So we're going to see a lot of progress in like being able to spend more time of really evaluating if the product meets your security risk for your specific mission need.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right, so this is going to be the last call for audience questions before we run out of time. So if you would like to ask another question, please submit it in now. Otherwise, Tori, I'd love to call on you for this next question here. And that would be, how is the development of DevSecOps changing the way in which we develop security skills?
I think this, goes back to probably what we said a little earlier, is that like when you're getting, more diverse teams together in the beginning, right? You're joining cybersecurity and development, operations and product and design, like earlier in the process, like you're naturally learning what each of the groups are doing, right? And also I've seen like a big, even like panels like this, like a few years ago, they were like few and far between, right? Where people openly talked about cybersecurity and agencies and, what was available. So I think there's more training available, and then people are realizing the importance of it. It's, cybersecurity is not the office down the hallway anymore that, kind of just pops in, at the very end. So I think, I think cybersecurity is learning more about like design, and, design's learning more about cybersecurity, which makes everybody like better at their job, right? So it's fun to see, it's fun to see people learning new skills.
Would any of our other panelists like to respond to that question as well? And Elise, I see your hand is up, but maybe that's just from the prior question.
Yeah, we don't use Zoom as much. I'm not as proficient in it, but I will say, like, to Tori's point of like a shift in landscape, I feel like previously some of the security professionals were coming from the mindset of being breakers of software, and now they're down the hall and instead of in the basement, and they're a part of the building team. And so that's a really fun transition, and I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Absolutely. Jeff, go ahead.
Let me just quickly add that I do think we see the need for these capabilities to be added to every person's repertoire. So cybersecurity people have too far long been, they have no idea how the software development process works, no idea how ops works. And they were these kind of compliance people. Say, listen, here's the control and you didn't meet the control. Rather than saying, well, we're a team and we didn't meet the control because I don't know enough about really how the controls are implemented to understand it. So I think the same thing is on the dev side. And then the biggest change has been for the ops people. The ops people were traditionally in control of how things got deployed. And that's with DevSec or with DevOps stuff that was going away. And their skills needed to be increased to be able to understand automation, coding, and of course now understand all the complexity of the terms that many of you have used today, because it's kind of like, I don't really understand what you're talking about, this framework. I'm not really familiar with that. And then I'll talk with my chief information security officer and he'll be telling me of all this stuff coming out. I'm like, well, that's great. Well, that's really awesome. And where would I find out about that if he wasn't keeping up with all those things? So like I recently just found out there's going to be a whole new encryption model with the 140-2 is going to be 140-3. And I'm like, what's different? He's like, a lot. It's really bad for us. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. We're just getting compliant with 140-2 and now we have 140-3. So I think it's so much to keep up with that. And this idea that what we did, right? We created DevSecOps, but in reality, it's just a product that we're delivering that needs to meet all three of those things. We just have traditionally taken developers from computer science, right? Ops people from kind of an IT background, and then security people from a cybersecurity background. But in reality, you need all those people to make the product. So I think it's just a matter of maturing so we don't have to call it all three things. We just say it's good product development. You know?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. All right, well, as we get to the end of our webinar, I would love to hear from each of you on a key takeaway that you are gaining from this discussion and just something that you think is of the most importance that you would like our audience to walk away having now a better understanding of. So we'll just go around and share with us for a minute here. Shannon, let's start with you, please.
Thank you for having me on the panel. I think my key takeaway is that there's always so much more that we can do at our agencies. I know USCIS, as it's part of DHS, we always think that we're doing pretty good, but there's always more that can be done. And I think just a final thought is that as a privacy person, we're traditionally in a very separate swim lane in the development process, the security process. So I think that if we look holistically at really integrating security and privacy into that development process, we can truly enhance the security posture of our agencies. And if you'd like to ask me any questions, feel free to connect on LinkedIn to continue that conversation about privacy and security integration.
Thank you, Shannon. And Jeff, we'll jump to you next.
Well, I guess there's a lot. I mean, it's always exciting to be on these panels because the quality of the panelists is so high. And I would say, you know, I'm really interested in what everybody had to say, but really what Daria's little story was around being a practitioner and then moving to a place where you could start to pave the roads for all the people, because I do really think we are our policies are not mature enough. They're not holistic enough. And I often equate it to like we have so many mature policies, and, you know, Andre's here from the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce has policies to make the United States work. You can drive a truck from one state to another, and that's part of the design. But yet you can be stopped and inspected. You can't do any of that stuff on the internet. You can just drive around, crash anybody, attack anybody, and there's like no internet police to stop you. You don't even have to have a driver's license on the internet. You don't have to have any of that stuff. And so I think that a lot of that is just because of our policies, and our current leadership doesn't really understand how important those policies are, and that just because we don't have policies doesn't mean we don't have a way of people acting. They're acting in a policyless model or a lawless model, in a way you could say it, right? So it's kind of the wild west of IT still. And I really want to have everybody check out the GDPR model. So GDPR is privacy for the European community. When that came out, 7 years ago or something, or even maybe longer than that, I'm sure, it was chaos, because it was a framework for how to do privacy, and nobody had the structure. But now when you interact with these foreign, and we have to interact with them a lot because we're trading medical research data back and forth, their privacy is so mature. They have people trained, and they have a structure. It fits into each country's laws, and they can move very quickly, where we're still stuck with California says we have to do it this way, and this group says we have to do it this way. We have no framework. So I do really think if you're interested in this space, look at what GDPR, and look at how, even though it was chaotic in the very beginning, is really going to create a lot of structure so that each country can have its own unique capability and accept the privacy that they're willing to accept, and not just be the opposite we have. In the United States, we have the opposite. We have no privacy for the things we want to keep private, like what we search online and things like that. And then we have all this privacy, like HIPAA, for all the things we don't. Like, I would like my doctor to see all my doctors to see all my health information, but the rules are that they can't. So I think a lot of that is something. A lot of that is we need. If we worked on that, it would help us all in general be driving down this paved path rather than this kind of open field or dirt road that we're on now.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And we'll jump to Lisa next.
Yeah, I again echo what Jeff's saying, like high caliber panelist here. So this has been such a delight. And I think my takeaway is that even despite having mandated policy, like try to impact what you can where you are, and cross those bridges. Try to, if you're a developer, talk to your ops person, talk to your security person, vice versa. If you're security, talk to ops and dev, and try to make the impact where you are without there being the mandate to do so. And every little bit helps. And try to find your community and share the best practices, and grow it how you can with those that you can.
Thank you, Elisa. Daria, let's hear from you next.
So I think that my answer is going to be pretty easy to guess. Maybe there should be a DevSecOps policy, or maybe an update to the open source policy. And how will that affect other policies that are currently out or in the works? And what kind of plans can we have to make all of the policies be cohesive across cybersecurity or other fields, and especially in privacy, because cybersecurity and privacy are very much linked right now. So it's got my wheels turning.
Thank you, Daria. And Tori, what is your takeaway from this discussion?
Panels like this are always fun and make you realize like what talent there is in the federal government. So I think that's, it's always amazing. When I was in federal service, like everyone's always willing to help. So if you're on this, listening to this, and you're like, I have so many questions about zero trust or cybersecurity or how to do this, like I'm sure anyone on here would help you. And if anyone has questions about FedRAMP, I'm happy to answer them. So, but this has been really fun. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you at home for participating as well. And a special shout out to VeraCode. Of course, we couldn't have done this without our partners. So if you enjoyed this content, I hope that you will join us for the next one, which it should be up on the screen here shortly. But you can always register for our virtual events online at our website at atarc.org. Don't forget to also respond to this last poll question about whether or not you would like to receive your CPE credit. And I hope to see you on July 26th for the Importance of Identity Management Virtual Summit hosted by ATARC. Everyone have a great rest of your week.